The wind was cold on the planet Kirellin. Daniel stood near the edge of a broken spaceport. His hands were shaking, not from fear, but hunger and cold. He had no credits, no food, and no one to call. The last transport ship left hours ago. He had missed it, and now he was stuck. Humans were not welcome here. The alien world of Kirellin had strict rules. They blamed humans for a war that ended long ago. Even though Daniel had nothing to do with it, to them, he was just another outsider. Another threat. He had tried asking for help. A shopkeeper closed the door in his face. A merchant threw dust at him and told him to leave. Even the robots ignored him, scanning him as worthless. Daniel sighed and sat near a wall. He pulled out his last item, a half-broken photo of Earth, a reminder of where he came from and what he lost. As the sun began to set, purple skies stretched above, shadows grew longer, colder, and more dangerous. Daniel knew he couldn't survive the night out here. That's when he heard footsteps, slow and firm. He looked up, expecting another angry alien. Instead, a tall figure stood. Still, watching him, it was a woman. But not human. Her skin was soft blue, her eyes deep green, glowing slightly. She wore a dark robe and held a small device in her hand. "You look like you need shelter," she said calmly. Daniel blinked in surprise, unsure if he heard right. "Are you offering help?" he asked, standing slowly. The alien woman nodded. "Only one room, but it is warm." He didn't know why he trusted her. Maybe it was her voice, or her eyes, or just the cold night. He followed her quietly through narrow streets. No one else looked at them, as if they weren't there. They reached a tall building, old and cracked. Vines crawled up the walls, and the door made a slow groaning sound as it opened. Inside, the house was quiet, almost too quiet. Dust floated in the air. Furniture was old but clean. "Place your bag there," she said. Pointing to a small bench, Daniel placed it down. Though it was nearly empty, he looked around, unsure if this was real. "I'm Ilara," she said softly. "You may stay, but there are rules." "Rules?" he asked carefully. Ilara nodded. "Don't go into the basement, and make no loud noise after dark." Daniel raised an eyebrow but said nothing. He had slept in worse places, ships, caves, even garbage piles. A warm bed was more than he had hoped for. "Deal," he said, and she gave a small nod. That night, Daniel lay in the small guest room. The sheets were rough but clean, and the walls were filled with strange carvings. He stared at the ceiling, unable to sleep. Why had she helped him? What did she want in return? Her voice had no hate, but also no warmth. It felt like she had done this before, offered help, then waited. As he closed his eyes, a sound echoed through the floorboards, a soft creaking, like someone walking below. He sat up, listening closely. Another creak, and then a low hum, like a machine starting. He remembered the rule, no basement. His heart beat faster, but he stayed still. He didn't want to be thrown out, not yet. Morning came with dim yellow light. Daniel stepped into the small kitchen, where Ilara was already seated. She handed him a bowl of warm green porridge. "Eat," she said. "Then you may clean the outer steps." Daniel nodded, grateful and confused at the same time. He noticed a painting on the wall behind her. It showed Ilara standing with another alien, a tall male, but the face of the man was burned out, scratched away completely. Ilara saw him looking and turned the painting around without a word. Daniel didn't ask, and she didn't explain. Days passed slowly, and Daniel stayed. He cleaned, helped with small repairs, and followed the rules. But the basement door kept calling to him. Every night, strange sounds came from behind it, and every morning, Ilara looked more tired. There was something hidden in that house, something heavy, something old. Daniel didn't know what it was, but he was sure of one thing: this was no ordinary house. And Ilara was no ordinary landlady. The sun rose slowly behind the fog-covered hills, bathing the city of Kirellin in pale yellow light. Daniel stepped out of the quiet house and began cleaning the stone steps, just as Ilara told him. The air was heavy with moisture, and the city still felt unfriendly. People passed by without looking at him, as if he didn't exist. He worked without speaking, his mind busy with thoughts he couldn't shake. Every night he heard strange sounds from the basement, the slow groaning of metal, the quiet hum of power, and sometimes even soft voices. But Ilara never spoke of it, never even mentioned the basement. She walked past it every day like it was never there. But her eyes always darkened when she did, like it hurt just to look. At that door, that evening, after dinner, Ilara gave Daniel a list of things to fix: the wiring in the hallway, a cracked tile in the kitchen, and a light that flickered in the bathroom. Daniel nodded, grateful for something to do. He was good with his hands machines, and repairs made more sense than people ever did. Still, every corner of the house felt too quiet, too still. The walls held a kind of silence that made his skin itch, like the house itself was holding its breath. He found a toolbox in the small closet near the front door, but as he reached for a wrench, something fell to the floor. It was a small photograph, old and dusty, its edges torn. He picked it up carefully and saw Ilara again standing beside the same tall male from the first painting. But this photo was untouched. The male's face was clear, sharp, and strangely familiar. There was something in his eyes: anger, maybe sadness. Daniel slipped the photo back into the toolbox and closed it slowly. Later that night, he sat in his room, listening. Ilara had gone to bed early, her face tired and pale. The house creaked with the same sounds as before: soft humming, slow footsteps below. But this time, there was something else, a whisper, too soft to understand, almost like someone crying. Daniel stood up, walked quietly through the hallway, and stopped in front of the basement door. He pressed his ear against it, heart pounding. There was movement inside, and for a second, a sharp beep like a scanner echoed from behind the wood. He stepped back quickly, afraid Ilara might appear. But the hallway stayed empty, the shadows stretching longer with every breath. The next morning, Daniel found Ilara sitting at the kitchen table, holding a small black box in her hand. She looked up at him, and for the first time, her eyes looked tired. "You slept late," she said, her voice quiet. "Didn't feel well," he replied. Not meeting her gaze, she nodded slowly and placed the box back into a drawer. "I'm going out for supplies today," she said. "You will be alone here." Daniel felt a chill move down his back. Alone in the house meant alone with the basement. After Ilara left, the silence became deeper, heavier. Daniel wandered the rooms, fixing a few lights and checking the wiring. But his eyes kept drifting toward that basement door. It stood there, untouched, yet full of secrets. He finally walked toward it and placed his hand on the handle. It was locked, of course, it was. But something strange happened when he touched the door. The humming stopped for a moment. Everything went completely still. Then a soft mechanical click echoed from behind the wood. The door remained closed, but it no longer felt locked. Daniel stepped back quickly, heart racing. He turned and walked away, trying to forget it. But as he passed the mirror in the hallway, he noticed something strange. His reflection showed a faint green glow around his hand, just like the glow in Ilara's eyes that night. He didn't sleep. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds from below. He didn't know what was behind that door, but he knew something or someone was awake in that basement, and whatever it was, it knew he was there. The morning sky over Karelen was filled with slow-moving clouds, heavy and dark like stone. Daniel stood at the small window, staring at the city, but his thoughts were buried deep inside the house. The green glow on his hand had faded overnight, but the memory of it stayed clear. He had touched the basement door, and something inside had answered. He didn't know how or why, but he felt it. Something inside that door had noticed him. Ilara returned just before noon, her arms full of supplies wrapped in cloth. She didn't speak much, just nodded at him and placed the items in the kitchen. Daniel wanted to ask her about the basement, about the man in the photo, about the glowing light. But when he looked at her face, calm and cold as ever, The words vanished from his mouth. He returned to his work quietly, trying to distract himself, while fixing a cracked pipe near the back of the house. He found something strange, a small metallic badge hidden under loose tiles. Covered in dust and dried oil, it was shaped like a triangle with alien symbols he didn't recognize. When he touched it, a low hum buzzed through his fingertips. He dropped it quickly, eyes wide. It was the same sound he heard at night coming from the basement. That evening, Daniel walked through the city, hoping to clear his mind. The streets were noisy with machines, vendors, and travelers, but no one looked at him. Still, something in the air felt tense, like people were waiting for something. He passed by a group of alien soldiers near the city gate. One of them noticed him and narrowed his eyes. "Human," the soldier said sharply. "Where are you staying?" Daniel froze, unsure how to answer. "Nowhere," he said quickly. "I sleep outside." The soldiers stared at him for a long moment, then turned away. Daniel walked fast, his heart racing, when he returned to the house. Ilara was waiting in the hallway. She didn't ask where he had gone, but her eyes scanned him carefully. "You shouldn't talk to the guards," she said softly. "They remember faces." Daniel nodded slowly, unsure how she knew. He wanted to tell her about the badge, but something inside him said to wait. Later that night, a soft storm rolled in, rain tapping against the roof like fingers. Daniel lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. Then he heard it again, whispers from the basement, clearer than before. He sat up slowly, walking barefoot across the cold floor toward the hallway. He stopped in front of the basement door and listened. This time, the voice was real. Not just noise. It said one word: "Help." Daniel stepped back, his heart pounding. It was not Ilara's voice, not something mechanical. It was tired, broken, and full of pain. He turned toward his room, but something made him look down the hall. Ilara stood at the far end. Watching him, she said nothing, only stared, her face pale and unreadable. Then she turned and walked away, disappearing into her own room. Daniel didn't sleep after that. The voice from the basement echoed in his ears all night. The next day, Daniel decided to speak to someone. He went to a small machine shop near the old cargo district. It was run by an older alien with one metal arm and tired eyes. The shopkeeper looked up as Daniel entered and frowned. "Human?" he said, surprised. "You must be lost." Daniel stepped closer and held out the metal badge. "Do you know what this is?" he asked. The shopkeeper's face went still. He took the badge slowly, turning it over in his hand. "Where did you get this?" he whispered. "From an old house," Daniel replied. "One with a locked basement." The shopkeeper looked at him sharply. "You need to leave that place," he said. "Now." "Why?" Daniel asked, voice steady. "Because that mark belongs to the rebel warriors," the old alien said. "The ones who disappeared after the war." "Rebel warriors?" "They were hunted, erased from records. Anyone who hid them was destroyed." Daniel left the shop without another word. His thoughts were spinning. Was Ilara one of them? Was the man in the photo a rebel? Was someone still alive behind that basement door? He had too many questions and no answers. But one thing was clear now. He was no longer just a guest in that house. He was part of something hidden, something dangerous, and the house, quiet and strange as it was, had started to feel like a trap. Rain poured harder the next evening, turning the streets of Kirellan into rivers of mud and broken light. Daniel stood in the hallway, staring at the basement door like it might suddenly open by itself. The voice he had heard the night before still echoed in his head. "Help," it had said, so clear, so human-like. Yet not human at all. He had spent the whole day trying to stay calm, but something inside him had already shifted. He no longer felt like a stranger in that house. He felt like a key, waiting to turn a lock. Ilara had barely spoken that day. She moved around the house like a shadow, her face quiet, her steps careful. Daniel noticed how she avoided the basement more than usual. Once, she stood near the door, just staring at it with her hand trembling slightly. Then she turned away quickly and disappeared down the hall. She was hiding something, and Daniel was done pretending he didn't see it. That night, after Ilara went to her room and turned off the lights, Daniel waited. The house grew silent again, but this time it didn't feel empty. It felt like something had woken up beneath them. He walked slowly down the hall, barefoot on the wooden floor. When he reached the basement door, he didn't hesitate. He gripped the handle, and this time it moved. The door clicked open with a slow sigh, and a cold breath of air washed over him. The stairs were narrow, covered in dust, and led deep underground. He moved carefully, each step creaking under his weight. The light was dim, coming from strange floating orbs that hovered near the walls. They glowed the same green color he had seen in his reflection. As he reached the bottom, he saw the room. It was nothing like the rest of the house. It was filled with machines, glowing panels, and metal walls covered in wires. In the center of it all was a large stasis pod, and inside the pod was a man, unconscious, floating in blue liquid. Daniel stepped closer, eyes wide with disbelief. It was the same face from the photo, the same male who stood beside Ilara in the old picture, except now his eyes were closed, and long scars marked his chest and arms. A panel beside the pod blinked red, flashing the word critical. Daniel didn't understand the language, but the message was clear. This man was dying. Suddenly, a voice spoke from behind him. "You opened the door," Ilara said. Her voice quiet but sharp. Daniel turned slowly, unsure whether to speak or run. "I heard a voice," he said. "It called to me." Ilara walked down the stairs, each step echoing in the cold chamber. "He has been calling for years," she whispered. "But only those connected to him can hear it." "Connected?" Daniel asked, confused. Ilara nodded. "My husband was part of the resistance, a rebel leader, hunted and betrayed. He was caught and wounded, and I smuggled him here before the guards found us." She walked to the pod and placed her hand against the glass, but the damage was too deep. His body couldn't survive without help. "I rebuilt this place in secret, using old tech, forbidden tech." Daniel looked around at the machines, the glowing panels, the lights that didn't flicker. "Why me?" he asked. "Why let me stay here?" Ilara looked at him with strange softness. "Because the pod responded to you, before I ever opened the door. Your presence woke him slightly, more than I ever could." Daniel stared at the man inside. The pod, he didn't look peaceful, he looked trapped, like he was fighting in his dreams. The hum of the machines began to rise, the lights flickering now. "He's fading again," Ilara said, her voice shaking. "I don't know how much longer the pod will hold." Daniel stepped forward, touching the control panel. He didn't know the symbols, but his hand moved like it understood. The screen flashed once, and the hum leveled out. Ilara gasped. "You stabilized him." Daniel stepped back, staring at his hands. "What am I?" he whispered. Ilara didn't answer, but the way she looked at him changed, like she was seeing something else, someone else. The room trembled slightly, and a low alarm echoed through the chamber. Then came the knock, loud, sharp, and not from inside the house. It came from the front door upstairs. Ilara and Daniel looked at each other, both frozen. Another knock followed, harder this time. Ilara ran up the stairs without a word. Daniel followed close behind, heart racing. Whoever was at the door knew something, and Daniel had a feeling this night was not going to end quietly. The third knock hit the door like a weapon, shaking the wood and rattling the windows. Ilara paused with her hand just above the lock. Daniel stood behind her, breathing hard, unsure if he should speak or stay silent. She turned to him with a whisper, "Go back downstairs." But it was too late. The door slid open on its own, triggered by an outside command. 3 armored figures stepped in, tall and silent, their faces hidden behind black visors. They didn't raise weapons, not yet, but their presence filled the room with threat. "Ilara," one of them said, voice cold and electronic, "we've come for inspection." Ilara bowed her head slightly, her face calm. but her fingers were tight against her side. "I have nothing to hide," she said. The lead soldier looked around, scanning with a device that buzzed in his hand. "This district has been marked for illegal tech signals," he said. "We traced them to this structure." Daniel stepped back into the shadows. Heart pounding, he could still feel the warmth of the stasis pod under his skin. The hum of its power was gone from the air, shut down just in time. Ilara moved slowly toward the hallway, motioning to the kitchen. "You're welcome to search," she said carefully. The soldiers spread out, boots clanking against the floor, scanners humming in their hands. One walked dangerously close to the basement door. Daniel clenched his fists, ready to speak, to lie, to run anything. But the soldiers stopped, turned around, and walked the other way. The inspection took 12 minutes. But to Daniel it felt like hours. Every beep from a scanner was like a warning bell in his ears. When the soldiers finally returned to the door, the leader gave a final look around. "No signs found," he said to the others, "but she's still under watch." They stepped back into the storm without another word. The door sealed behind them with a hiss, and silence returned like a slap. Ilara fell into the nearest chair, her shoulders shaking. Daniel stood still, too stunned to move. "They almost found him," he said quietly. Ilara looked up, her eyes wet but fierce. "They'll be back. They always come back when they smell something hidden." Daniel stepped forward, voice low. "Then we need to fix the pod." She stared at him like she wasn't sure if she had heard right. "You want to try again?" she asked. "You realize how dangerous it is?" Daniel nodded. "Yes, but I've seen the inside now, and I think I understand it more than I should." Ilara led him back into the basement, and this time, she didn't try to stop him. Together, they opened the side panels of the pod, revealing glowing circuits and energy veins. Daniel touched one gently, and it pulsed to life. The lights in the room flickered, then settled into a steady glow. "I can feel it thinking," he whispered, "like it wants to live." They worked for hours, wires, circuits, and heat swirling. Through the air, Daniel's fingers moved without hesitation, as if they had done this long ago. Ilara watched him carefully, studying his movements. "You're not just a traveler, are you?" she asked. Daniel didn't answer, but he felt something inside him unlock, like a door in his mind slowly opening, revealing pieces of himself he had forgotten. The pod beeped 3 times, then let out a soft chime. Ilara gasped and rushed to the monitor. "He's stabilizing," she said. "His vitals are rising." Daniel smiled for the first time in days, but it didn't last long. The screen suddenly flashed red, and a warning symbol appeared. "External signal detected," it read. "Unauthorized connection incoming." Ilara turned pale. "They placed a tracker during the inspection. They know the pod is active." Daniel moved fast, shutting off the power lines and disconnecting key systems. The pod went dark, but it was too late. The warning remained on the screen, blinking like a heartbeat. "They're coming," Daniel said, "and next time they won't knock." Ilara stepped forward, her eyes hard now, no longer afraid. "Then we fight," she said. Daniel looked around the room, at the machines, the tools, the pieces of broken tech. He nodded slowly. "Let's prepare." The quiet house, once a place of dust and silence, now filled with tension and heat, and deep in the dark of the stasis pod, the man inside moved. His fingers twitched slightly, his eyes blinked once. He had heard their voices, felt their fear, and somewhere in the back of his mind, a name echoed: Daniel. Asterisk smoke curled from the rooftop vents, rising into the dark sky like a signal flare. Inside the house, Daniel moved quickly from room to room, setting up makeshift traps. Ilara followed him silently, placing small devices along the walls. They had no army, no weapons of war, but they had time, tools, and desperation. Daniel rewired old cleaning bots to explode when stepped on. He placed mirrors to reflect light into sensors and wires across the halls. Ilara sealed off the kitchen window and turned the hallway into a narrow maze of stacked crates and metal bars. The pod in the basement stayed dark, But Daniel knew the man inside was still alive. The connection had not broken, even with the systems off. He felt it now like a quiet heartbeat in the floor. Ilara knelt beside the pod one last time, placing a hand on the glass. "I promised you I'd protect you," she whispered, "but I didn't think it would come to this." Just after midnight, the alarm flared, a sharp, screeching tone filled the entire house, then fell silent in one breath. Daniel rushed to the front window and peeked through the cracks. A black armored vehicle was parked outside, its lights off, but its shape deadly. 6 figures stepped out. This time not in inspection gear. They wore combat suits and carried shock rifles glowing with blue energy. They were not here to talk. Ilara grabbed a tool from the table and handed Daniel a short blade. He looked at it, then looked at her. "We're not soldiers," he said. "No," she replied. "We're something worse. We're desperate." Doors shattered in one blast, sending wooden pieces flying across the room. Smoke grenades rolled in, filling the air with thick silver fog. Daniel ducked behind a wall as a red beam sizzled past his head. One of the traps went off, a burst of heat and noise. A soldier screamed and dropped to the floor. His helmet cracked. Ilara moved like water through the smoke, striking fast, vanishing again. She knew every corner of the house, every blind spot. Daniel found himself in the main hallway, heart pounding. He wasn't a fighter, but he had one advantage. He had nothing left to lose. He lunged forward, grabbing the leg of a soldier as they stepped over a wire. The blast was small but enough to throw them both across the floor. He rolled, hit the wall, and gasped for air. Pain shot through his side, but he stood up anyway. Ilara screamed from the back room, a short, sharp sound. Daniel ran toward it, pushing past falling beams and cracked walls. He found her holding a metal rod, blocking the path to the basement. A soldier stood across from her, weapon raised. "Move!" The soldier barked. "You can't protect a corpse." "He's not dead," she growled. "And neither are we." Daniel didn't hesitate. He tackled the soldier from the side. They crashed to the floor, the weapon sliding away. Ilara swung the rod down, once, twice, until the soldier stopped moving. Breathing hard, Daniel sat up, his body shaking. "They know he's here," he said. "They'll send more." Ilara looked at him, face covered in dust and sweat. "Then we wake him now," she said. They ran to the basement. Sealing the door behind them, Daniel reconnected the power lines with shaking hands. The pod lit up again, the blue glow returning slowly. The man inside twitched, then opened his eyes. For a moment, everything stopped. His eyes moved from Ilara to Daniel. And something in them changed, recognition, confusion. And then something deeper, connection. The pod opened with a hiss, steam rising around him like smoke. He stepped out slowly, weak but alive. Ilara caught him before he fell, tears in her eyes. "You're back," she whispered. The man looked at Daniel, voice rough. "Who are you?" Daniel opened his mouth to answer, but no words came. Instead, the house shook again, another blast, closer now. The man straightened, his muscles tightening. Even wounded, he looked like a weapon carved from war. "They brought the second wave," he said. "Then we finish this," Daniel replied, surprised at the strength in his own voice. Above them, the house burned and cracked. Below, 3 people stood together, one with secrets, one with lost memories, and one with nothing but the will to fight. And this time, when the soldiers came through the flames, they would not find helpless victims. They would find survivors ready to bite back. The fire above roared like a hungry beast, licking through the beams of the old house. Flames painted the ceiling red as smoke choked the rooms one by one. But in the basement, under the storm of war and ash, 3 hearts beat as one. Daniel stood at the front of the room, his body bruised, his lungs burning, but his eyes clear. Behind him, Ilara gripped her husband's arm tightly, helping him stand. The man, though weak from years of sleep, now stood tall again. His name was Vale, once a rebel leader, now a ghost returned from time. The second wave came fast. Heavy boots and laser fire crashing through the broken door. Ilara pressed a button on the wall, and the stairwell behind them exploded. The entrance collapsed in a cloud of dust and stone, cutting them off at least for now. "We bought time," she said, voice shaking. "But not much." Daniel turned to Vale. "You were a leader, right?" Vale nodded, eyes dark with memories too old to forget. "Then lead us," Daniel said. "One last time." Vale touched a console near the back wall, and a hidden chamber slid open. Inside were pieces of old armor, scorched but strong. He slipped it on slowly, his movements stiff but certain. Daniel found a second set, smaller but usable, and strapped it over his shoulders. Ilara stood between them, holding a short plasma blade, once hers, now glowing again for the first time in years. As the smoke above them thickened, a voice echoed through the rubble. "Ilara of House Nile," the commander shouted. "You are charged with harboring a traitor and a human criminal. Step out now and be erased quickly." Daniel looked at Ilara. "That's a very polite death threat." She smirked, eyes fierce again. "I've heard worse." The three of them moved through the old tunnels behind the house. Daniel had never seen them before, narrow, dark, and full of forgotten wires and tech. They were escape routes. "Once," Vale said. "But today we're not escaping. We're going to turn the fight around." Daniel asked, "How?" Vale answered with a slow smile, "With you." They reached a hidden door beneath a metal hatch, and Vale placed his hand against it. The panel scanned his palm, then flashed green. The hatch opened, revealing a hidden command room filled with old machines and dusty monitors. "This was our network base," Ilara said, "before they burned everything." Daniel looked around in awe. "Why didn't they find it?" "Because only someone with his blood can open it," she said, pointing to Vale. Daniel stepped forward, touching one of the dark screens. It flickered, then turned on. Lines of alien code lit up, shifting and folding into something strange, human language. Vale blinked. "How is it responding to you?" Daniel shook his head. "I don't know." But something inside him whispered that it was never random. He wasn't just stranded. He wasn't just poor. He was chosen by accident or fate. It didn't matter now. They activated old defense drones, powered up the shield grid, and reconnected the house's last remaining systems. Above them, the soldiers closed in, but the ground began to pulse with hidden power. Turrets unfolded from the earth, shocking everyone in their path. Traps lit the ruins with fire and electricity. And through it all, the voice of Daniel rang across the frequency. "This is not your world to burn," he said. "Not anymore." The battle above was brutal, fast, and loud. But Vale led them like a storm. He moved through fire like it was wind, his blade striking with remembered fury. Ilara stayed at his side, never letting him fall. Daniel, from the command room, guided the defense like it was part of him. The machines obeyed him like a commander, like they had waited for his voice for years. When the final ship tried to retreat, it was shot down mid-air by a repurposed mining drone. The battlefield fell quiet, only crackling fire and broken armor remaining. Ilara sat on the steps of the smoking ruins, her head resting against Vale's shoulder. Daniel climbed out from the tunnel, covered in dust and sparks. He looked at the two of them, smiling despite the pain. "You still want that rent I owe you?" he asked. Ilara laughed, the sound tired but real. "You've paid it in full." Weeks later, the story of what happened spread across Corellan. The rebels were no longer dead myths. The machines that had once been buried had risen, and a human poor, stranded, and forgotten had helped turn the tide. They rebuilt the house together, not as landlord and tenant, but as something more, a family made by war, forged in fire. And every night, when the wind blew cold across the rooftops, Daniel stood at the edge of the city, staring at the stars. He had come to this world with nothing, but he had found a home, a fight, and something even rarer: people who saw him as more than a burden. He was no longer just a human with no money. He was the reason a broken world had one last chance.